What's up? We're on our way to one of our friends' counseling office. Holly just got off work, and she's kind of going back to work. We're gonna go talk to a bunch of counselors about kind of the state of mental health. I mean, I run into it a lot at my job as a police officer, with especially around the holidays. People are stressed out or missing family, or there's just a lot of stuff that's going on. So we thought it'd be a good idea to introduce you guys to some people that are involved in mental health and why they got into it, and maybe after this first video we can have a question and answer session and send it to them and try to respond to you.
And don't worry, I'm the one recording. He's not recording and driving at the same time. I'm excited to be able to share some amazing professionals that are in our community with you guys, and hopefully this can start more communication in the future about mental health and take away some of the stigma that comes with it.
The Lacey Life is here in Tandy's facility. Thanks for having us. Basically, we talked about on the way up here, Holly's profession in the mental health field, so we grabbed a bunch of our friends to kind of describe it, right, and talk about it a little bit. So just introduce yourselves to everyone.
Okay, my name is Whitney Harris. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor. I've been practicing for about 10 years now. Currently, I am the clinical director at Bright Tomorrows, which is a child advocacy center. We work pretty specifically with children that have been sexually abused. We work to do, there's two components to our program. We do mental health for kids, and then we also do forensic interviews and assist with investigations for that. I worked in private practice for about 5 years before I was there. I spent a year in this school, so I've had a little experience here and there.
Why did you get into it? Why did you get into counseling in the beginning?
In the beginning, it was kind of a weird path. So my undergrad is actually in Parks and Recreation, and I went to work at a wilderness therapy program when I graduated with at-risk youth. So we were like traveling all over the mountains with kids in tow that were struggling, and I started working with the clinical director there. It was just kind of by chance, and became a case manager, and then he was like, have you ever thought about doing counseling or therapy? And he's like, well, now that you mention it, maybe I will. So applied for graduate school, and here I am.
My name is Matt Anderson. I'm a clinician at Physicians Mental Health Services here in Pocatello. I'm also a licensed clinical professional counselor. I've been in practice for about 10 years. And I specialize in treatment of trauma and substance abuse. So I've worked in a residential treatment facility for adolescents with substance use disorders. I've worked in a psychiatric hospital, and now I work in an outpatient mental health clinic. So I've had a lot of different settings. But when I talk to people about why I got into this field, it's all about a lot of influence from people that were important to me in my life. My mom worked with developmentally delayed toddlers for the state of Idaho when I was growing up, and so I got to see a lot of benefits that she gave to other people. Had an awesome school counselor in high school. I actually went to school to be a school counselor, but I got pulled into substance abuse treatment. And then just other people that kind of mentored me and kind of helped, usher me into this field, and just haven't looked back since. So
Awesome.
I'm Tannis Peterson, and I am also a licensed clinical practicing counselor, and I work at City Creek Counseling, which is where we're at, and my business partner and I own this. And I've been a counselor for about 5 years. I got into counseling for a lot of different reasons. I always have really enjoyed working with kids, and so I primarily work with kiddos and do play therapy, attachment disorders, things like that. But I got into counseling, had a grandma who was a foster parent, and so that was always something that I really admired about her, and saw how beneficial that was to help kids at a very young age with some early intervention things. And so I've always just wanted to be able to give kids a voice. I've worked a lot with kids with sexual abuse and trauma, attachment disorders, helping foster families kind of navigate and blend families and values and beliefs, and then adolescents, teens, and adults. And so a little bit of everything in a variety of different settings, and even some stuff at the college level with student affairs counseling. So
Awesome.
So my name is Savante Jackson, and this is my first year working as a counselor. I run a comprehensive school counseling program, and I love it. I work at a local elementary school here in Pocatello, and how I kind of got into this, I've always worked with youth my entire life. I started off coaching youth football, worked at the Boys and Girls Club, training athletes on the side, working with youth as well. So I guess to sum it up, I felt my whole life like I was kind of destined for this. I've always loved helping people and be a mentor. You know, it's even my younger siblings and family members and friends. So working in a school was a way to do that. So I decided to go into school counseling.
Well, I'm a shoe counselor. I wear Nikes. I'm a licensed Nike professional counselor.
Is that like the pet food counselors at Petco?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, anybody's labeled counselor, right? You can work at camp, like if you're at a camp, you're a counselor, right? That's not anybody's labeled it, right? Go ahead.
So I'm Holly, and I'm a school counselor.
You are.
I'm a school counselor as well, and I work in the elementary schools. I actually get to supervise Tavante, and so that's been fun to be a supervisor to up-and-coming counselors or new counselors in our school district. I got into counseling. My whole family's in education, or a lot of my family is, and so I always knew I wanted to take that track, and I started in elementary education, and I was like, holy cow, I don't know that I can stay with 27 kids all day long. It's really nice to be able to be a school counselor and bounce back and forth between all classes and get to experience all students in the school. I spend a lot of time teaching classroom guidance lessons and building those relationships so that hopefully kids will come to me when they need help. And then I do a lot of mental health counseling in our community and in our school.
So I kind of alluded to the joke, right? A lot of people get labeled a counselor without anything, right, real criteria that goes into it, right? I know this person's a counselor, or I am a counselor, I do this thing. So how do you guys feel about that? Like that so many people are labeled as counselors when they really aren't?
I feel like it's cool. Everyone wants to be a counselor, you know? They're just so awesome.
I feel like it's uncool.
I think it's confusing to families and to kids even of, I don't, they don't understand really what counseling is or,
Yeah. Well, and I know at Bright Tomorrow's we had a case come through a couple of years ago probably now where there was someone who was a counselor who was unlicensed that ended up sexually abusing a whole bunch of kids that was getting referrals from all kinds of places in the community. It was a really, really ugly situation. So find someone that's licensed, check them out.
I take pride in all of the trainings I go to and the advocacy that we do for our profession. So when I hear somebody say that they're a counselor, the first thing I want to know is, what's your training? Where did you get credentialed at? And what does your practice look like? But I also agree, I like that people want to help and support people. I just wish they wouldn't use that counselor title.
And I think it's okay for, especially with parents bringing kids to see people, counselors, whatever, right, to ask for those credentials and ask to see, just like what Holly, you were saying, you should be very proud of those things and display your license and those types of things. But if you don't, I think it's absolutely okay for parents to ask, hey, let me see, let me verify this, because there is a lot of that happens.
Yeah.
I think you see it a lot. I mean, you do some marriage, right? And then you do a lot of drug.
Substance abuse.
I don't.
You don't do drugs, but you do a lot of substance abuse.
It's okay to ask that too.
But and I think that in those two fields, you hear, like, I'm a substance abuse counselor, and they didn't go to school, or they didn't. So I guess, what do you guys bring to the table in both like marriage and substance abuse? What do you bring to the table that from your education that makes you good at what you do?
So I would say, especially in the realm of substance abuse counseling, it's important to ask those questions, right? Because someone might say that they're a counselor and they have a different path of education and understanding to get to that point. And for someone like myself, I've been through the training, I've been through the education, the experience to get to understand both the mental health side and the substance abuse side, because most of the time those two things are coming together. It's extremely rare that we would see like a substance use problem without something in the mental health realm that kind of underlies that. So asking those questions about like their training and about their comfort and their experience with mental health and substance abuse is really important.
what about for marriage? How is it?
I think it's along the same lines. You know, there's a bunch of trainings that you can go to, and if you find an area that you're really interested in, seeking out those particular trainings. And so I think when a potential client is looking and seeking for somebody who specializes in child advocacy stuff, or attachment, or marriage and counseling, marriage family counseling, or substance abuse, or any of those types of things, asking what kind of trainings do you have? You know, a lot of the marriage counseling things too. It can be based on experience. How long have you been doing this? You know, what is some approaches that you use? What are some of the, you know, names like Gottman and those types of things for family and marriage counseling, and how do you implement that? So I think it's just all about asking what it can be like your theoretical approach to counseling, you know, those types of things.
And I think that's so interesting. A lot of times, I think families they just want a counselor. They need a counselor. They need somebody to help them. And they don't even realize that we all have different specialties that we pull from. And so I think that's really important to help advocate for the people that we work with, and showing them our specialties, but also helping them find specialties out in the community. And in the school counseling, we're very careful with kids that have experienced some type of sexual abuse to not go too deep into it, because we're not specialized in that, and we're not trained in how to help them in appropriate ways. And so that's when we refer out a lot and go, you know, to Bright Tomorrows so that we can get help.
That leads right into what I was going to say. So in my job, right, I encounter something to where a child may have been, you know, touched inappropriately, or something has happened, and I'm actually not allowed to talk to them, right? I mean, I get a brief summary real quick, and then so kind of talk about forensic interviews, like how are you so special?
Well, there's a lot of reasons I could go. With forensic interviewing, it's very, very different than counseling. It's not the same thing at all. At our agency, all of the forensic interviewers happen to be counselors, but they're not the same thing. So with a forensic interview, what we're doing is we're talking to kids in a way that is forensic, meaning it can be used in court. Our interviews are submitted as evidence in these investigations, and so we talk to kids in a way that we're not leading, we're not suggestive, and we're trying to gather all of the information from the child so that if it shows up in a courtroom later on, nobody can say that we planted that information with the kids. So the way that we ask questions is very different than counseling. With counseling, there's a lot of talk about feelings and emotions and that sort of thing, and in a forensic interview, our job's to get the facts. So
would you be the forensic interviewer and then be the counselor to that kid?
Nope.
So those are totally separate.
Yep. Anytime one of us interviews a kid, then they would have to, if they want to get counseling services, they'd see another counselor, because it creates a dual relationship. So if we have to testify in court, we want to be able to honestly say, this is the only interaction I've ever had with this kid.
Makes sense. So like you just described that, there's a lot of rules involved, right? So especially for you guys working in the schools, like kind of talk about, I guess, what is it like trying to navigate being in a school, but then also trying to use what you do to help kids? Because I guess you got to navigate through class, recess, lunchtime. That's important, right, to these kids, right? So how do you navigate that to effectively help, I don't want to say your clients, but your students?
A big thing in a school setting, you know, there's a lot of collaboration, you know, with teachers, principals, and even other staff members, you know. And a big thing that I try to do inside of the school setting is just keep things that should be confidential, things that should stay in the counseling room, inside the counseling room. I know like a lot of teachers want to inquire on like, oh, what happened or what's going on, and there's certain things we're bound by confidentiality that we can't necessarily talk about. And we want to assure that we don't do anything to, I guess you could say, hurt the relationship. Yeah, harm our students, or do anything to harm the relationship.
You have anything to add on that?
I definitely take a systems approach, and I believe that to help a kiddo, you have to include the parents and the staff members and the principal and the behavior tech and whoever else is working with that kid. I think it's really important to include that whole system, and then also give the student a voice. But building those relationships in the school with all kids is so important, because there's so many kids that you would label the perfect kid that have a lot of scary things going on at home. So if you can build relationships with all the kids and let them know and advocate for your counseling program,
then hopefully those kids that you wouldn't have ever said this kid has a red flag will then come to you and talk to you. But also respecting them. They need recess, they need lunchtime, they need to not feel abnormal when they come to our office. And so building that relationship is really important in the school.
I think one thing that he mentioned is confidentiality. I think that's one of those things when you talk about adults getting mental health services, right, and getting help, they don't want people to know because of a stigma. How do you guys battle the stigma of trying to just show people that, hey, we're just here to help, and that just because you may use us to cope or to learn how to navigate through their lives, how do you make sure they know that it's normal and it's something that it's okay. It's okay to come to us for help.
I think a lot of it's about education, because even thinking about the school level, and I know you asked about adults, but I can remember even as a kid, it was very hard for like even people that I knew, like school counselors, like, oh, it's scary, taboo, don't go to them, something will happen, you'll get taken away, all of these things. And I see that not only as in a kid level, but as an adult level too. Everybody's worried. It's the stigma, and it's all about, I think, education and helping people understand we're not here to, take your kids or to hurt your family, or even, judge the dynamics that's going on. We're really here to, everybody needs somebody to talk to. And I know that when I'm first starting with kids, families, adults, whatever that might be, one of the first things that I tell them is, I'm here to listen. I'm here to help figure out and just hear what you're saying. Because a lot of times, there's not a huge secret to our job. We're here to listen, and a lot of times we just need somebody to talk to and even to hear our own thoughts. And when we're in our life, we don't have time to sit down and slow down and listen to what it is that we're saying. And so it's nice to have that person that's objective, that's outside of their family or friend group or whatever that might be, to be that objective person. And so sometimes that's helpful to kind of normalize, hey, all of us need that place to talk.
Right. It's their one time to be selfish, and just to use the time for them.
Absolutely.
Well, especially like the substance abuse thing. I mean, I like my gratification quick, right? Like
we all do.
I want, if I'm gonna go work out, I need a 6-pack tomorrow, right? Like
if you're gonna buy shoes, you're gonna
right. If I buy these Jordans, I'm gonna dunk tomorrow, right? As soon as I put them on, right? So I can still dunk, but I guess, how do you battle that? How do you battle the instant gratification, like especially in substance abuse or in those kind of things?
The journey takes time.
Yeah, how do you guys battle
that?
Well,
it goes back to education again. When people come to my office, one of the first things I like to lay out for them is what progress looks like, because we want to, especially with the way that things work today. If I have a question, I Google it, I have the answer right away, right? And so sometimes we expect that in a lot of areas in our lives, and so it's education with the clients of saying, look, progress is not a straight line that goes from 0 to like feeling better. There's a lot of ups and downs. It takes a lot of time, and in some ways you have to trust the process, and we'll work together to trust each other through that, and just education.
I think that's one of the most common things that I get asked, right? Especially with family or marriage and couples counseling, is how many sessions do I have to show up? what is the end goal? What is the typical? And then I go back to what they always beat you with in the program. It depends, right? I don't know. Do they still say that? Yeah. Okay. So I'm glad to hear that that's going strong. But it really does depend. There isn't like, oh, you'll come for 5 sessions and it's all better, right? Or you'll know. And so I absolutely think that that's the hardest thing, I think, for people to accept and understand. Is
we have to
next time.
Yeah, we have to advocate for kids that way often. Teachers, parents, school principal. We want them better, right? We want them better so they're in their seat learning, but it takes time. And sometimes we don't ever even see their aha moment when they're able to resolve what's going on for them, and they have the aha moment when they're 30, and something that they worked on when they were little then catches on later in life. And so it's really just giving them skills and giving them a safe place to be able to talk, and then hoping that they're able to work through that with support from a counselor.
So in my job, especially around holiday time and winter, right? Because it's cold and it's depressing. Is that the right term? Counselors? It's depressing, right? But you see a lot of stuff, and it's hard. It's hard on me to see stuff with people battling stuff. So obviously, you guys interact with. Sometimes I never go to somebody's good day unless I'm in a parade, right? I don't really go to somebody's good day. So for you guys, especially initially when they first get there, it's not always a good day. So I have ways of coping with it, but how do you guys cope with that? Like when you first get that client or student or person that shows up and they just unload some heavy stuff on you, how do you guys deal with that?
Personally, us, or how do we help them?
No, how do you personally deal with it?
Well, I know at our job too, at Bright Tomorrows, it's never a good day when someone's walking through that door. So it's pretty heavy work sometimes when we're talking exclusively about child sexual abuse all day, every day. So for me at our agency, something that's been very important is that we have a very close-knit staff. We debrief with each other a lot so that we're not breaking that confidentiality. We try and process that at work so that when we go home, we can leave it at home. And we've had a pretty strict policy that we don't work on Fridays in our office so that we have a little extra time to unwind on the weekends. And that's been very helpful. So
that's cool.
And I think that's a big part of it too, is practicing what we preach. Because we have people that come in and they feel overwhelmed, they feel stressed, and this is why they're turning to substances or alcohol or other things. And we're encouraging them to take some time for themselves, take a hot bath, go for a hike, spend time with your kids, do those things that feel selfish, even if that means you have to sacrifice some of the things you feel like you should be doing. When I have to do the same thing, right? Like, I take kind of a lighter load on Fridays, and Saturday and Sunday I spend with my family, and I spend doing things that I enjoy doing things with my hands or making music or whatever that is. And I have to have that on a weekly basis in order to be fresh for the next week.
I do the same thing. I use my family a lot for that support, and then where it's just Katie and I here, we also are very close and do and debrief with each other as well, because it is hard. You do work with individuals that are going through a lot, and that's hard to not then take that on, right? So it is about having those boundaries and having those self-care, and then those moments when they have that aha moment that you do get to see, right? Those are the best. Whether that's mine, I love seeing that with adults and stuff, but it's really cool to see with kids when their parents come back, you get word from like school counselors or teachers like, oh, they're doing so much better. It's just like, oh, okay, this makes sense. This is why I do what I do, right? That moment that was that meltdown in the office, that was worth it, right? And I just think that's really cool to get to be a part of.
Yeah, I'm amazed, for me, one thing that really helps me is I'm just amazed at because I work with kids, so I'm with K through 5th, so I'm amazed to see like some of the resilience that some of these kids have. They deal with a lot, and they're able to overcome a lot. And what helps me being in a school setting, I get to sit in a heavy counseling session with a student, then 20 minutes later I get to see them at recess, having a good time with their peers, smiling and laughing. So to be able to see that resistance in the kids, it helps. And on top of that, it's just self-care, leaving work things at work and being able to do everything that you need just to take care of yourself spiritually, physically, emotionally, and psychologically.
Anything else you got to add on?
I agree. Just self-care, where however you can get it.
Best answers. I agree. What they said. That's said. So I guess one thing, a lot of times we talk about like bigger cities, right? There's so many people, there's more things to get into. Do you feel like your jobs vary maybe by population as far as like how many clients you see, or is it vary, or is counseling just counseling wherever counseling is? Yeah.
I think the situations you deal with are different depending on where you are, and so it depends, right? Right. Dang it! I never ever wanted to say that phrase when I graduated, and I say it all the time. It's so sad. But it really does depend on where you are. So I mean, if you're in a more rural community, you're going to see definitely different, and I think the dynamic between counselor client is different too, and in a smaller place you need to have those conversations. If I see you in public, they say this is, and I think I have that all the time, and with if I see you, I'm not ignoring you, you can come talk to me, but I'm not going to come talk to you, those types of things. And I just think that the types of issues that you see in different areas varies as well. So
I just attended a meeting in San Diego, actually, where they're trying to come up with, it's through the child advocacy movement, but they're trying to come up with some ideas for better treatment for rural populations, which is really what we deal with here. And we talked about some of that overlap between urban and rural, and there is a lot of universal things that are poverty, abuse. There's all kinds of issues that wherever you go, you're going to find it. And then there's a lot of things that are very specific to that environment. So I know there was a lady from Alaska that was talking about for kids to get a forensic interview up there, some of them have to get in a little twin engine plane and fly 6 hours somewhere, and then snowmobile in somewhere else, and then take a 2-hour car ride to get a forensic interview. Trauma. I mean, really, right. So, I mean, I think there are some things that are very unique about where you live that can be specific.
Well, and the culture of where you're at too.
Sure, that's a big influence too.
I think about this video, I think this is better than I thought it was gonna go. Where this could be.
Did you think?
Oh, thanks.
Hey, that's a lot. That's a lot of confidence.
I just meant like I thought it would just be like we just go and ask a question, everybody be shy, but you guys are all like, yeah, let's do it.
We're passionate. Talk, right?
You're passionate. So I think we got to do more episodes. I think.
We are paid to talk, so we have to be somewhat
Talk a little bit about you, about law
enforcement.
enforcement.
We got to do more episodes though? Yeah? Okay. I think that would be good. About what now?
Mental health and the law enforcement. You've got a bunch of professional counselors here.
No, you guys are all analyzing me.
Are we all married to law enforcement?
That is true, yeah. All three of us are married to law enforcement.
You're not.
Well, I mean, the girls. Sorry, I talk about the girls.
I'm single.
I am single.
Hey, well, that's a good. Well, before I talk about the law enforcement portion, I think one cool story about us. He played football, and I was on Facebook, and they had this. You guys got interviewed talking about graduate school, right?
Yeah.
That's what it was. He got interviewed talking about graduate school, and I saw that he was on there getting interviewed about talking about graduate school, and said he was going to go be going to counseling, and then that's how.
He was like,
you've got to reach out to him and just let him know that he can come be at your school if you want to.
So
it's been cool.
That's a cool relationship.
Yeah.
So I get an assist on your master's degree.
He is seeking for some serious validation.
I know,
I'm hearing something.
I feel left out with you guys.
We all like your shoes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think one thing though about the whole mental health thing, I think that affects me obviously is that sometimes we are entered into a situation where it is crisis, right? They're already in their crisis, and knowing what I know. And the schooling and the training and the hours that you guys put in, I get thrown in a situation and somebody says, "Oh, I'm gonna kill myself," and I gotta I can't fix it because I understand that. But in our minds, when you're not involved with counselors as much as we think, well, we're gonna fix the problem. I'm gonna fix it. I'm gonna fix it right now, And the majority of for a law enforcement. Perspective is that I think that when we interact with people in the mental health field, it helps us understand that it might not always be just the person, the bad guy or a bad girl. They're probably dealing with something, and I think that's
you're seeing the symptoms, but there's this core thing down here
there's
that
something
really
else.
needs help.
And the one area that I think affects me the most personally is like domestic violence. We arrest Mr. Smith 5 times. Mrs. Smith always takes him back, and we go through this cycle of stuff. And when you realize, you go back to work and you're frustrated that you have to deal with it, but you realize, man, she's really, I'm using a female, but it could be a male too, but she's really, something is going on upstairs that is forcing her to go back, and you like, I wish you could just pluck her and drop her in front of one of you guys to help her, empower her, and so that's kind of, I guess, our avenue with it is just trying to figure out. We do get crisis interventions training from people in the mental health field, and our department's really strong about that, and we really are intertwined. But the other portion of law enforcement that I think is
Gets
interesting, overlooked is ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Dealing with ourselves. I mean, I got a built-in counselor in my house. I have a built-in counselor in my house, or I have PlayStation. So
that's
self-care.
so I have I understand.
There's self-care.
I understand there's self-care. So I guess how do we teach not just law enforcement, but I guess how do we
surgeons,
do we
doctors,
teach
those high
people, even stay-at-home mothers? I mean, how do we teach people? I mean, what do you want to say to the YouTube land about counseling? Like, how do we teach people that there are people like you that are nice, smart,
super cool,
and helpful? You guys are all right.
awesome in every way.
Awesome in every way. Perfect. Dang, you're perfect people. No
That's going too far.
Okay. See, counselor. See, how do we get people to encourage people to use,
bash the stigma?
To use you guys? What do we do?
If I were to say one thing, I would say no matter what you're struggling with, you're not alone in it. There are other people out there that struggle with similar things that you do, whether it's substance abuse or dealing with something, a difficult relationship or something that you've seen or been through.
Childhood trauma.
Or childhood trauma. We all have things that we have struggled with, and no matter what you've been through, there have been other people that have been through things that are similar and have struggled in ways that are similar to you. One thing I like to tell people when they come into counseling with me, I say I've been doing this for almost 11 years. I can guarantee there's nothing that you can tell me that's going to shock me.
Right.
Like, I've heard it, and this is what I'm here for. I'm here to help you and help you get through that. You don't have to do that alone.
I think one of the things too, it goes back to that stigma idea, right? You don't, and a lot, and I hear this sometimes at home too with this stigma for law enforcement seeking counseling. It doesn't mean that people who go to counseling, you're not crazy, you're not broken, it doesn't make you weird
or weak.
Yep, it's not a sign of weakness. It's just what it is. That idea that if we can normalize counseling as this is just somebody outside my world to talk to hear my story so that I can hear it in a different perspective and I can hear it for myself, maybe for the first time. That's not a bad thing. We all have to have somebody to talk to.
I applaud people. I always, like, when I hear somebody's in counseling, I'm like, go you. Go you for taking care of yourself and saying, hey, I'm important and I need somebody to talk to and I need somebody to listen to me because what I'm feeling is important. And so it like gives me chills when I hear like people that are in my world and professionals that I look up to are in counseling, because it means they're having self-care. Just like we go to the gym and spend time with our families, play PlayStation,
or go to the doctor,
shopping.
Even.
Right.
There's no difference between
it's all self-care.
And that's one of the biggest things that I do talk about is the fact that would you ignore symptoms of some type of a chronic illness or even of a like strep throat or cancer, or would you ignore that? No, you'd go to the doctor. There's not a stigma tied around that. You'd go to the doctor.
Right.
You'd get medication. You'd follow through with that, right? Mental health is no different than a medical diagnosis.
That's the same thing I was going to say. I use that analogy a lot with clients, that it's just like a medical issue. If you have a symptom of something, go get treatment for it. And it's not any different with counseling, but there is that stigma with it. I think, speaking to law enforcement in particular, because I work with law enforcement so much, and my husband's in law enforcement, so he's a real gem. Anyway, but no, you guys, I know before I was really exposed to that culture, I had no idea. I'm like, those guys are just out giving speeding tickets and DUIs. That's all they do all day.
Avoid the roads, there's a quota.
Yeah, I had no idea. And the things you guys deal with day in and day out, people have no idea. Like, it's gruesome. Like, every day, like you say, you're not ever walking into
happy.
Yeah. Well, I have an interesting perspective of it because my husband, I'm also law enforcement, right? But my husband's whole family was in law enforcement, and so his view of it is very different. And I think that's interesting too. Is he really grew up with it and in it, and so I don't know. It adds a different element.
Well, I got a special one for you, and it's not law enforcement, but how
is special?
What about like young minorities, right? That we didn't talk about our problems growing up, not often, right? What kind of stuff? I guess if you could talk to young minorities, how would you encourage them to get their help?
Okay. What I say, young minorities. I would say that as a minority, Definitely have a unique experience, you know, being in society, and all people could use help, you know. We don't have to struggle through things alone. And if you need counseling, don't be shy, don't be hesitant to seek counseling, and
Doesn't make you any less tough.
yeah, it's not gonna, it requires a lot of strength actually to address, you know, what you're going through instead of just putting it on the back burners.
Right.
So to address what you're going through and try to be more proactive than reactive is something that
At some point in your life, that stuff has to come out. It can't stay buried forever.
No matter who you are.
Right.
Young, old, white, black.
It's going to come out at some point, so you might as well address it on your terms and when you can be in control of it versus when it's just going to come out at some point.
Yeah.
And sometimes when it does come out and you've tried to suppress it for so long, it doesn't look very pretty. It's harder.
Something I'd like to say about that is I think finding the right counselor is really important. But something I think people should know that probably a lot of people don't know is that in counseling we have a code of ethics, and a huge part of that is being multicultural and having an awareness about a variety of cultures. And so, you know, again, find someone that's a good fit and shop around if you need to with counselors, because not everyone is going to be a good fit.
That's a great point.
But I know I'm thinking of a particular client who had a different cultural background than I did, and I remember in the first session she's like, "You're just a little skinny white girl that doesn't know anything." And I was like, we got a lot of talking to do, and it turned out great. I mean, we finished counseling and it was awesome, but it was, I think a lot of people have that perception that you know, they aren't going to get me, they're not going to understand.
And I think that's a great way to wrap this up today. That's something that I hear often is, how can you understand what I've gone through? You've never been there. So what do you guys say to that?
You know, there's a lot of situations that we face that we haven't been through. But, you know, the analogy I use is you go to the doctor when you have a broken arm, you don't expect the doctor to have had a broken arm to help you fix it. Even though I haven't been through those experiences, I can feel for you because you're sitting in front of me, and I can see the emotion that you have, and I'm in it with you, right there. I can understand, and we can talk through that. I don't necessarily have to have seen the same things or heard the same things to understand the way that you feel.
To be willing to learn to understand and learn what that means to them. I think that's huge. I'm here to listen. I may not have gone through everything that you've gone through, right? But I'm here to listen and learn and understand, and that's something that a lot of people I don't think have in their worlds, is that ability to have somebody there that's willing to just sit and listen.
And I think the idea of process versus content, I mean, just no two people, no matter how similar you are going to have the same experiences. And so I think that's unrealistic. But there's so many emotions that are universal that when you kind of take away the details of the situation and boil down the shame of a situation or the grief of a situation or the sadness or the fear, those kinds of things are universal. Everyone's felt those feelings.
Well, sweet. Well, we thank you. One thing we learned on the whole YouTube thing, you gotta say goodbye to the camera.
Yeah, they don't like the
goodbye. Goodbye. Well, I guess it's more see you later. See you later. Yeah, you guys are gonna do something later. Hopefully we can get you guys, buy you dinner or something, get you guys all back again. At home, Holly brought up the idea, the fact that talking about mental illness could sometimes spark people and needing, or trigger somebody and needing some help, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but at some point. So we want to make sure that we provide you with different courses or different avenues that you can contact if you do need some help, or if you know somebody that needs some help, because we all can use it. Also, this panel was really fun. It was cool to watch, obviously my wife, but and some of our friends discuss what they're super passionate about, and so they're willing to continue discussing it. So if you have any comments or any questions that you would like answered, maybe at a later date, let's get that done. We'll do our best to get it in front of one of the members of the panel. They all have their own specialty, and we'll try to get it in front of them, and that way we can get your questions answered. We really, really appreciate you watching this video. I know it was a little bit longer, but hopefully it gave you a good insight to what counseling and what mental health can look like, and we hope you have a great week.